Hi, today I am going to be giving a brief overview of JavaScript map and how you can use map to write better JavaScript code. Map is really a fundamental part of the JavaScript language. It's a really key feature. And if you are going to be using JavaScript at all for web application development or any kind of front-end web development, you really do need to know map, and you should use it because it's great. And the good news is that it's really pretty simple once you know what's going on. So let's get right into it. What is JavaScript map? Map is a feature of the JavaScript language. It is a method available to you that allows you to more easily work with arrays. So what map does is it allows you to take an array and iterate over each element in that array, perform some kind of work, right? Perform some operation on each element, and then map returns to you a new array with new elements that have been modified in some way. And in this case, and in this way, it's different from a similar method that you may have heard of called for each in JavaScript. For each is very similar. For each allows you, again, to iterate over each element in an array, perform some work on each of those elements. The key difference being that for each actually modifies the original array that you're working with, where map returns to you a new instance of the original array. And in that case, I think map, and in that way, I think map is more useful because it allows you to perform work on data that you might have in your website or your application, but it protects that original data so that you don't lose it. And so, again, each has their place, but map is really a great tool. So my goal today is to just give some really basic examples that show how you can use map in different situations to write good code. So as you can see here, I have my Sublime Text editor open. I have this map.js file here, which is actually hooked up to a really basic HTML5 file that I have fed to my Firefox browser. So as we are working in Sublime Text, I'm just going to be typing here, and we'll load it up and we can take a look at the output from our map work in Firefox. So a first example. Say, for example, we have an array, right? A really basic array. And this will literally just have some numbers in it. All right. Now, imagine that our application requires that, we could assume that this is maybe data from an API. This is input data from a user of our application, whatever it is we're working with. Imagine that we need to add 1 to every item in that array, right? Excuse me. For each would be an option, but in this case, we're going to use map, right? So let's do this. We're going to create a new array, right? We want a new array, and in that array, we want to have these same elements, but with 1 added to each of them. So this would be 2, this would be 3, this would be 15, etc. Right? So what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, this variable new array is equal to the original array, right? This variable is equal to the original array. Because this array variable is an array, we have access to the map method, right? And so in this map, within these parentheses right here, we're going to put all of the code that we want to use on each of these elements in the array. Right? What is between these parentheses is what is going to be applied to each element as it iterates, as map iterates over the array. So here's what we want to do. We want to say, for every item in the array, right, we're going to run a function, a basic function of each element. Right? So what this is saying is, for each item, for each element in the array, we're going to run a function of that element, right? And all we're going to do is we're going to return that element, right? We're going to return 1 plus 1, right? And then this function is going to run again, and this time it's going to be a function of 2. We're going to return 2 plus 1, right? And then this function is going to run again, and we're going to run 14 plus 1, right? So each time this function runs, we're going to return a new element, which is the original element, just plus 1, right? And now if we wanted to take a look, we could say, okay, we can console log the original array, and then we can console.log our new array, right? I'll just save that, and then we can open up Firefox and refresh this and take a look. So as you can see, the original, right? The original here on line 9 is the original array, and then on line 10 we have the new array, line 9 and line 10. So we have 1, 2, 14 of the originals, and then as you can see, each of these plus 1. So that's a really simple look at how the map feature can be used to modify really quickly and easily each element in an array. The key thing to remember, I think, is that the functionality that we're focused on is what is in between the two parentheses, the map, parentheses, map, boom. So this function is run every single time, right? It's run each time there's an element in the array. It's run one time for each element in the array. Great. So I will just put up here, right, example 1. Now let's take a look at another example. Just a little bit more complicated, right? So in this case, let's say, for example, we have an array of temperatures, right? And so say we have some temperatures in Celsius that we would like to convert into Fahrenheit. So I will just put down some random Celsius temperatures. Now let's create a function that we can use to iterate over, let's create a function that will allow us to take an array, work each element in that array, and take that array of Celsius temperatures and return an array of Fahrenheit temperatures, right? So here's our original array of Celsius temperatures, and we're going to create a convert function, right? This function is going to take a temperature array, right? And it is going to first, well, let's put in some logic here. First, we want to check to see if this item, if this parameter passed in is in fact an array, right? So let's say if temp array, right, dot constructor does not equal array, right, then we are going to throw let's do this, convert function requires an array. All right. So what this is basically saying is we're creating a function whose purpose is, right, this function is going to convert a Celsius array to Fahrenheit. Hopefully I spelled that wrong. Right. I think that's correct. Right? So we're going to convert a Celsius array to Fahrenheit. So this function takes an array of Celsius temperatures. First, we're going to look at this right here. I wouldn't worry about this too much. This is just a technique to check and see if this object is in fact an array. So we can look at the object, look at its constructor, and then determine whether or not that's an array. If the object passed into this function is not an array, it's going to throw an error, which we will see on our console. All right, so if it is an array, right, if we do determine that this is an array, then we are going to return a new array, right? So this is going to be temp array, and then here we are back to our map, right? So now we're going to map something. What we're going to do is for each of the elements in the array, right, we're going to say, this for each of these, there's a function of the temperature. So we're going to say for each element in this temperature array, right, we're going to iterate over that, and for that temperature, we're going to do some work to it. And here we want to convert the Celsius temperature to a Fahrenheit. So we're just going to perform, and I have this figured out from before, so I'm not just doing this off the top of my head. We're going to take that original temperature and we're going to times it by 9/5, and then we're going to add 32. And we're going to round this temperature times 9/5 plus 32. We're going to round that just to the nearest whole number. And this logic right here is just the logic to convert a Celsius temperature into a Fahrenheit temperature. So what we should see here, the output from this should be that we have a new array that is Fahrenheit temperatures. So if I do this, if I say var new temps, right, is equal to our old temperature, is equal to passing in this temps array into our new convert function, right? So again, what is this doing? We're creating a new array, right? We have a variable new temperatures, which we take this convert function and we pass into it the array of Celsius temperatures that we have here. So what we would expect new temps to be is a new array of Fahrenheit temperatures that are equivalent to these Celsius temperatures. And so to test this, we can just console.log first the original array, right? This is the Celsius array, and then we'll also console.log our new variable here, our new array, new temps. All right, and now we'll just reopen up Firefox and we'll see what we get. Cool, so this looks good to me, right? So up here we have our original Celsius temperatures up here, and then this new temps array is those same temperatures but in Fahrenheit. So 32 degrees Celsius is roughly 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Awesome. So let's look at one final example to see how we can use map with objects. So I actually am going to take some data that I had just put together previously. And what this is an array. So again, we're still working with an array, but this is an array of objects, right? So as you can see, we have an array, but in this array, we have a collection of objects. Now, you can see each of the objects in this array has a name, a famous musician, guitarist, a lot of them. And each of these artists has 2 grades, and these are students, famous students. So the goal here is that we're going to try to determine which of these students have passed. And so say they're taking a class together. We want to know which of these students have passed. And how we're going to do that is we're going to look at their 2 grades, right? We're going to look at grade 1 and grade 2 for each of these students. We're going to add them together and find the average. And then we're going to see if that average is a passing grade. So here's what we're going to do. We have this array of objects, which is great. I'm going to create a new variable, which is called passing grade. And that is going to be equal to 70. So in order to pass this class, the average of your 2 grades needs to be 70 or greater, right? So our object, our goal is to try to write a function that will take an array of objects and check to see if the average of their 2 grades is greater than 70. What we want, our goal is a new array that tells us each student and whether or not they passed. So this could be a program for teachers or something like that. All right, so let's actually take a look at what we might do. So we want to create a function here that is going to give us a new array of objects that tells us whether or not each of these students pass. All right, so I'm going to call this results. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at our students, right? Students array, and we're going to map. And for each of these, right, we're going to modify the student in some way. So first of all, we're going to calculate the average, right, the average grade. So the average grade is going to be student.grade1. So each of these students has a grade, right, plus student.grade2. And then we're going to divide that by 2 to find the average, right? We're going to say if the average, right, if their average score is greater than the passing grade, right, then we are going to return a new object. We're going to return an object that is the name, which is the student's name, and whether or not they passed. In this case, if it's greater than the passing grade, then it's going to be true, right? And that's it. If the passing grade, right, if their average is less than the passing grade, then we're going to return a new object, which is their name, same as before, and passed is going to be false, right? So they did not pass. Cool. So let's take a look. Again, real quick. Results is actually a new array, right? Because here results is equal to the students, right? It's equal to the original array, except that we're going to map over each element in that array, perform some work, and then return a new element, right? So we're going to take each of these objects and then return a new object. Again, we have the average, which is equal to their first grade, right? Grade 1 for each of them, plus grade 2 divided by 2, i.e. their average. If the average is greater than 70, greater than the passing grade, then we're going to return, in place of this original object, a new object, which is just the name, right? Student.name, and then whether they passed or not. Passed, true, right? If they did not have an average grade higher than the passing grade, then we're going to return the name and passed as false. Excuse me. So let's take a look at the results array. So we should expect to see an array of objects, which we do. And each of these objects should have a name and passed as true or false, right? So first one, Stevie Wonder, passed is false. Now, if we look at his grades real quick, back up in the original, right, we can see that he got a 75 and a 55. Therefore, the average of those two is definitely less than 70, and he should have failed. So his passed is false. That looks good. Jimi Hendrix is true. All right, Jimi Hendrix got a 95 and a 78. If you average those together, that is definitely greater than 70, so he should have passed. So his passed is true. And you can see for each of these, we look good. So we have essentially very quickly taken an original array of objects, done logic on each of those objects in the array, and then returned a new array of objects with actually different information. Right? In this case, the name and whether or not they passed. So these three examples, I hope, just show you how, from something as simple as adding 1 to every item in an array, to doing number conversions, to even taking arrays of objects, performing logic on them, and then returning new arrays of new objects, while still preserving, right? We can still console.log our original students array, right? That's fine. All right, if we look at this, we can see we still have the original objects with the grades and the names. So we have essentially very easily created a new array of objects while still preserving our original. And as you can imagine, sky is really the limit when working with map. So I hope this was helpful. I'll put some links down in the comments, down in the description, to some pieces that I think you should read if you're interested in learning more about map. And I would encourage you to play around and see what you can do with it. Awesome. Have a great day.